Hello, Royalers. Thank you for joining me for another great episode of the Royal, Black, and Elite. And today is going to be a little different from what we normally do. I'm Lady T. I'm your social historian and lecturer. And today I wanted to spend a little bit of time in the political realm. Now, the reason I want to do this is because midterms are coming up. People are starting to vote, and we want to be intelligent about the people we put in office. If you want a seat in this Congress, then you're going to have to line up with what's important for American values. And I thought it'd be great to start with the history of the Democrat and the Republican Party. So, as always, I want to thank you for joining me. This is going to be a great episode. It's going to answer a lot of questions for some people, and it's going to bring to light some things that some of us didn't know. Now, before we get started, I want to be clear that this is not going to be me telling you who to vote for. What I'm going to do is just give you the history of both parties. I think you'll find it interesting. I think you'll find it useful as well to when you go out and vote. As always, I want to thank you for joining me. I thank you so much for your likes, your shares, and your subscribes. It is really making the difference. When you press like, it moves this information up in the algorithm. And so I can't do it without you. So I really appreciate you. I also want to thank you all who have been going to my Cash App, joining in the push for this channel, for this material going out so that others can know and you can get involved too. So definitely go out to the website www.nauep.com to learn more about what we do. Hit that Cash App, and here we go. Let's talk about some politics. Now, listen, you all, I think it's a good time to talk about this because Congress right now is rated at 18% as of May 2022. Now, let's compare that to an approval rating of 84% in 2001. So I think it's a real good time to talk about that. Today, less than 30% of the American population trust the government and feel duped by candidates, which made me interested in doing this video for my royalers because we're preparing to go to the polls and vote people in to sit in these seats that we're looking at. Now, I believe the more educated we are, the better choices we can make when we cast our votes. And amazingly, we don't know a lot about the history of these two parties, the two largest political parties in the United States, their policies and their impact on communities, in particular, because this channel talks about Black history, Black communities. Now, let's start at the beginning. I think this is so interesting, and why we see why some of the third parties have never been able to emerge. So, if you've ever heard of third parties like the Libertarian Party, Progressive Party, even the Black Panther Party, these parties have not been able to emerge because of the grip of our two-party system. So, let's start from the beginning. Originally founded as the Federalist, the Democratic Party was founded in 1792 by John Quincy Adams, George Washington, and Alexander Hamilton. So some of you may recognize George Washington as the first president and Alexander Hamilton from that big play. So these is who are the Federalists, and they believed in big government. They believed in central banking. So they wanted to tax the people and big government. And, there were some people in the faction who didn't really kind of agree with that. They had another belief. Though they believed that there should be a government, they felt that they should be, there for protection as far as protecting the country, but not in your daily life. So in steps James Madison and Thomas Jefferson, and together they founded the Democratic Republicans in 1792. And this was called the Jefferson Party because he was the president for a long time, and he really ruled the roost. And they were in power until 1825. So much so that the Federalists had to dissolve in 1815. They were unable to convince people that big government was good, in a nutshell. So, with no opposition, the Democratic Republican Party again split into two. One, they who were supporting Adams, and the other party of people who were supporting Andrew Jackson, who had become a part of that party during that time. And later on, they were called the National Republicans and also the Whigs. So you have the Whigs now and still the Democratic Republican Party. They were founded in 1834 by Henry Clay. Now, the Whigs would really stay in power till about 1852. And their whole platform was they were anti slavery, they were pro business, but they dissolved in 1852. So they went back under the leadership of Andrew Jackson and the Democratic Republican Party. But things got really heated because of the policies of the Democratic Party. Now, the Democratic Republicans turned into the Democratic Party. So now you have Republicans that were founded in 1854 because of this rift that happened because of the Kansas Nebraska Act, which was passed in 1854. Now, during that time, they would call Jackson, well, they called him dim minded, unintelligent. And because they call him that, they called him also a donkey. And that's how you have now the symbol of the donkey for the Democratic Party. And in stark contrast, when the Republicans were founded, and they were founded in 1854, we're going to get into this Kansas, Nebraska, and kind of what happened there. But in the 1870s is when they established the elephant as their logo. Now, when the Republicans came aboard, what they wanted was anti slavery, expansion of railroads, and giving free land to Western farmers instead of giving it to the slaveholders or the free, and they wanted also people to have free market labor. So this was the really the platform of the Republicans, and their first leader was Abraham Lincoln. Now, the Republicans really rose and stayed in power after Lincoln, and even a little bit before him, because he had a message anti slavery. He also pointed out the mistreatment of Republican black senators in the South. So he really championed for black people and the ending of slavery, which we know the Civil War happened. Now, unfortunately, after the untimely elimination of Lincoln, the VP, who at the time was Andrew Johnson, really didn't believe in everything, shall we say, that President Lincoln did. And he partnered with pro slavery factions within the Republican Party as well as with the Democrats, which angered the radical Republicans. Now, Ulysses S. Grant is what was called a radical Republican. And he fought Johnson Democrats who favored the former slaveholders after the war. And so they formed a loose coalition. Grant them did with the scallywags and the carpetbaggers. And they fought even the KKK and other groups who were really, really mad because slavery was over. By 1876, however, despite the fighting, Rutherford B. Hayes was counted and was elected as president, and he withdrew federal troops within these former slave states. And so that was horrible because in welcomes Jim Crow, and we now have the end of the Reconstruction time period, and that was 1876. Now, despite what they had done, the Republicans had done regarding Black people and the Civil War, by the time McKinley took office, the McKinley tariffs hit at 50%. And the country was, they didn't want to pay that 50%. So here we see the Democrats sweep back into power. And also because the Republicans was trying to pass prohibition. That wasn't going down. So in 1933, they lost power again. So we see the dynamic going up and down, but not till Franklin D. Roosevelt did the new and his New Deal really solidify the black vote. And blacks have been voting for Democrats ever since then, unaware, I think, a lot about the history of slavery and voting against black issues, as well as policies that have hurt the black community over the years. The Republicans have also done things, to hurt communities as well. But I wanted to make sure we knew the history, where it started from, who started, and what their platforms were back then compared to what they are right now. So, what are the platforms right now? Now that we can get the racism off the table, because we can see now the Democratic Party was founded, lived, and get their bread and butter off of racism, whereas the Republican Party, not so much racism, but really sometimes unfair business practices. So both parties have their issues, but it's just astounding how no one knew about all that was going on with the history of the Democrats. Now that we know the history, let's turn back to who we put in these seats this fall. So I saved this to the end because I'm not a Republican nor a Democrat. I vote on the issues. And so when we look at the platform of both parties, when you go in that room to vote about who's going to sit in this seat and make real life-changing decisions for your life, do you really know what these platforms are? So let's begin with the Democrats. And the Democrats kind of from the very beginning, they've always believed in big government, strict business regulations. They believe in the women's right to choose. They heavily push the LGBTQ agenda. They also believe in more public schools versus charter and private schools. And they believe that parents have some rights over their children, but they believe that the government really has more rights over your children. So if you are a person who likes those that platform, you like those beliefs and values for your home. They also more so keep the religion out. And but they have a lot of social programs. So they do believe in helping people when they get down and get in trouble and need help getting out of it. So this is the Democratic Party. Now, the Republican Party's platform varies greatly from the Democrats. It's just the total opposite. They believe in closed borders. They believe in smaller businesses, less regulations on businesses, whereas the Democrats believe in renewable energies and green energy. The Republican Party believes in using all energy, including coal and gas and oil. They do not push the LGBT agenda. They believe some for a woman's right to choose, and some of them are pro life. Um, they believe in you being able to send your kid to a private school or a charter school, wherever you want to send your children. And they believe in a religious freedom, freedoms of speech. So it's really like almost a libertarian party, but the business aspect is there. And that's the piece. They believe in businesses running free, which doesn't always translate to workers benefiting from that. But then sometimes it does. So if those beliefs are important to you, then when you walk in there, you're going to vote Republican. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and learned a lot about the history of the Democrat and Republican Party. No matter what, remember to go out there and vote and make sure your voice is heard. And now that you know the facts, you know how to vote a little bit smarter and a little bit better. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you in another great episode of Royal, Black, and Elite.